Hello to all the Queen's Young Leaders. I'm Rita Banerji, speaking to you from Calcutta, and I'm the founder and director of the 50 Million Missing campaign, global grassroots campaign to end the female genocide in India. The subject that I'm going to be speaking on today is that of role models. It's a topic that comes up very often in the work that I do. And my stand on role models is that the current approach to role models, particularly in context of the growth and development of individuals and of society, is not particularly healthy or constructive. And the reason is because I think that the way we approach the idea of role models today, it does three things. One, it encourages conformity. Two, it encourages uniformity. And three, it discourages critical thinking. I will explain that later on. But first, I want to talk a little about role models. Role models are usually of two kinds. One, sometimes campaigns, organizations take a prominently placed social person as a role model, but often for individuals, it's someone in your personal sphere can be a role model. And what I'm going to talk about today applies to role models, whichever way you take it. The generally, what is the function of a role model? And with a role model, what we assume is that first of all, the person stands for something, either in who they are, in what they do, a cause they may stand for, an action they have taken, which we think is inspiring for good, for society. So it is something that we expect people to emulate. Two, we expect that that individuals will see this person and reflect on what they would like to do, use that person as a mirror for self-reflection, who I am, what I want to be, what I want to do, which is basically personal growth or a personal vision of life. And the third thing is where we see that person who's a role model in context of a larger society. We look at that person in terms of the impact that person has on society, or what their significance to the work they do, or who they are as individuals, as social individuals, what that means to the growth and development of a larger society. But in essence, whenever we are talking about a role model, what we are thinking of is good. That what this person does is good, what this person's represents is good, what this person's impact on me as an individual or on society as a whole is going to be is good. But what if the role model has certain character traits, has done certain things that are not good, that are bad, that I would not want in me, that I would not want in society in general, that I would not want that person to have an impact on in terms of social, that particular action or those particular character traits on society as a whole. And then how do we respond to that role model? And what I'm going to do is, and I'm going to bring in an example here of an individual who has been and is still often used as a universal role model by individuals, by societies, and even nations. And that person is Gandhi. I'm not going to talk about the good things Gandhi did that everyone knows about, but I'm going to talk about Gandhi in terms of a phrase that is often used about Gandhi, and that is Bapu, or father. He was the metaphorical father of the nation, but he was a father figure to the people around him, the young people around him. There were lots of volunteers in Gandhi's movement who interacted with him on a day-to-day basis, who lived with him in his ashram. And I'm going to make a reference to particular things that Gandhi did, and that no one is going to classify as good. This is the negative aspect of Gandhi's actions and personality, and that has to do with his practice of getting young women, even girls, some of them underage girls, to volunteer to sleep naked with him in his ashram. He would pick these girls, handpick these girls, and among these girls, some of them were underage, they were 17, 18. Two of the girls were his own grandnieces, so there's an element of incestuous sexual abuse that comes into these actions of Gandhi's. And he would have them, he would be lying naked in his bed, and they would lie naked next to him at night under a sheet. Now, he called these his experiments. They were experiments about sex and sexual libido. And initially, it was not known, but as it got to be known, it created a lot of dissension. People were upset, and a lot of people in the Gandhi camp confronted him. In fact, within the ashram, a lot of people left him, they stopped supporting him, and there was a breakdown in harmony within the camp. And Gandhi's response to that was he was defiant. He believed he was doing right. He believed he had a right to do it. He called these his experiments with truth, and he even began to publicly talk about it as a way of asserting them as righteous, asserting these actions as sort of righteous actions on his part. But for me, when I had heard about these things as what I thought was hearsay, but when I began to do my research for my book, Sex and Power, at that time I found a lot of this information, and what surprised me was that I didn't actually have to dig very deep. It was all open. It was known. There's plenty of documentation. There were letters exchanged. I didn't have to go. I didn't have to go digging very deep. These were not hidden issues, you know. And the thing that surprised me then is that why has this never been discussed? When there are textbooks, articles, and various other things written about Gandhi as an individual and the impact he had on his immediate society, why aren't these things brought out? Why aren't they discussed openly? And that is why I have written some articles about it. The reason I'm bringing this up now is that the response to, because I have in my book there's a section on Gandhi's actions, and the fact that I then began to look deeper into Gandhi's role in how he viewed women, what his impact on the women's movement at that time was. And contrary to what some even feminists have argued, that he had a net positive impact on women's participation or the position of women in society, I found quite the opposite. My conclusions were quite the opposite. I found a lot of sexism and misogyny, and I have argued that there was a full-fledged very vocal feminist movement in India that was coming up. But Gandhi introduced a sort of almost a misogynistic, sexist, patronizing approach to the role and position of women within society, within households, that I think continues even now. That was my extrapolation from when I began to reflect on these actions of Gandhi of sleeping with naked girls. But the thing is, in my conclusion about Gandhi, I was very clear that Gandhi had a pivotal role in India's freedom movement, that such a vast country, such a vast nation of diverse people, there was no one at that time who could unify India and lead this massive grassroots movement like Gandhi could. His role to India's freedom movement was pivotal, and I do acknowledge that. But by the same token, Gandhi, as the most powerful man at that time, who could click a finger and India would jump. Here he was heading probably one of the biggest and most powerful social movement in human history. And what he did with these young women and underage girls is no different from what men in positions of power do today. That there is a violation of trust and an abuse of power in how they self-righteously violate the rights of women or girls, in and indulge in sexual abuse. Because this, for me, as I looked into this was clearly sexual abuse. When the response of the girls, there was with some of the young women, there was extended depression. There was when you look at the diaries of the girls, the parallels between incestuous sexual abuse and what happened between Gandhi and these girls is unmistakable. For example, these were, I'm talking about especially the underage girls, they viewed him as a father figure, and the conflict of loving and trusting someone, seeing them as somebody protective, and then where Gandhi would swear them to silence, and they were sworn to silence, that they would never tell anyone as to what they actually did in bed, which is very typical of child sexual abuse. And then Gandhi would tell these girls that if their minds were pure, then they would not regard these things they did with him as dirty. That if they thought of this as dirty, then definitely their own minds were not pure. And so this is the kind of power play that very often comes into that hierarchy of power in incestuous sexual abuse. And for me, the parallels are unmistakable and unforgivable. And the impact, for instance, Manu, one of his grandnieces, who was 16 or 17 when she came into the ashram, she, soon after Gandhi died, the family, Gandhi's family, they crowded around her, they confiscated her diaries, they forbade her to speak to anyone, and she was under virtual house arrest and was perpetually sick. She was depressed and sick, and these were obviously psychosomatic symptoms, and she died very early. She died before she was 40. So for me, if I refuse to look at what was going on, the other side of the story of the impact that Gandhi had on the people that surrounded him, I feel that I am collusive in an abuse that happened at that time, just as I would be if I had the same response of silence or ignoring it if it happens, if and when it happens now, and it does. The dynamics are the same. The hierarchy and the abuse of power is the same. So for me, it surprises me that when I write about it or other people write about it, people's response, and not just the average public, but intellectuals, people who would otherwise consider themselves as liberal and standing for human rights. They want to hush it up, they want to gag you, or else they come up with explanations which I absolutely cannot understand how they are able to explain this away. And the reason I'm bringing all this up is because I want us to come back to what I first said,